How did a famous English queen experience quarantine when a deadly virus infection broke out? First, we are going to take a short look at this strange sickness to understand its symptoms and its deadly impact, because this virus killed extraordinarily fast. Afterwards, we are going to look at the spread within the household of the royal family and the queen-in-waiting Anne Boleyn, who at that time was still the sweetheart of King Henry VIII. Welcome to History Tower. In the Middle Ages, people sometimes had to go into quarantine when infections spread like the plague due to bacteria, or the spread of viruses like the so-called sweating sickness that we are going to look at today. Not only because it was a mysterious illness that modern scientists assume was caused by a virus, but also because one of England's most famous queens, Anne Boleyn, caught it and had to go into quarantine. Origin of the sweating sickness. Her father-in-law, King Henry VII, introduced the sweating sickness into England by his army of mercenaries and prisoners in 1485, when he fought for the throne against the last Plantagenet king, Richard III. The deadly disease was first recorded in 1485 and lasted until 1551, with 5 epidemic outbreaks altogether. The mortality rate lay between around 30 to 50%. The symptoms usually broke out during the night or in the morning with chills and tremors, followed by fever and weakness while the body was covered with perspiration. The French ambassador, Cardinal du Bellay, even reported a slight pain in the head and at the heart, accompanied with sudden sweating as symptoms of this disease. After the infection, death often occurred within the same day or even within hours. Perhaps with a dark sense of humor, people said that one could be fine at breakfast and dead by supper. This disease was also said to be the easiest in the world to die of. Sickness outbreak in the English court. The sweating sickness seemed to spread especially during the summer, for instance in 1508, when the court went on progress. Upon the news that the sweating sickness was spreading in London, the court reacted immediately. They kept away from crowd gatherings and started to eat hot spices, garlic, leeks, and they banned wine because they thought it would rise the body temperature and increase the risk of infection. Nevertheless, the royal household and many courtiers got infected, and people were afraid that everyone would get wiped out. Both Henry VII and his son got infected, but they would recover as well as several courtiers, only for the king to die in the following year, 1509. Anne Boleyn caught the virus. The sickness reappeared in 1517 and again during the summer heat of 1528. Anne Boleyn's father took her from court to their family residence at Ives Castle. The queen-in-waiting caught the sweating sickness from one of her servants, and it seems that her entire family got infected. During that time, she was the beloved sweetheart of Henry VIII, who immediately fled the city with his current wife, Catherine of Aragon. Anne's brother George Boleyn and his wife Jane were at Kent and travelled with the king and queen, probably to avoid their infected family members. The king sent desperate letters to Anne, worrying about her health and informing her that her brother George, who was at Waltham Abbey, had fallen ill but had also already recovered. The king also wrote about his fright upon hearing the news that Anne had become gravely ill in June 1528, shortly after the outbreak. Quote, "The uneasiness my doubts about your health gave me disturbed and frightened me extremely, and I should not have had any quiet without hearing a certain account. I beg of you, my entirely beloved, not to frighten yourself, nor be too uneasy at our absence. For wherever I am yours, and yet we must sometimes submit to our misfortunes. Comfort yourself and take courage, and make this misfortune as easy to you as you can. He sent her his second-best doctor. As king, he of course kept his best doctor within his reach. His letters to Anne have been preserved and can even be read online. On the 13th of June 1528, it was reported by the French ambassador that the king was left completely alone due to him preferring quarantine. In the city of London, more than 45,000 people were reported as having been infected, but there were under 2,000 deaths. Anne was staying at her family home in Hever Castle, and her father also got infected. Therefore, it is possible that Anne's mother Elizabeth also caught the disease, but no report can be found on her health during that time. Anne Boleyn's activities during quarantine. What did Anne do during her quarantine? She met the king's second-best doctor, William Butts, that the king had sent to Hever Castle and had begged her to listen to his doctor's advice. She also received a letter from Cardinal Wolsey, who had sent her gifts, and Anne answered with a kind and conciliatory letter, thanking him and assuring him that she would do anything for him if it lay in her power, once the annulment of the king's marriage with Catherine of Aragon would be completed. She also mentioned in her letter that she had prayed for the cardinal and for the king to be saved from the illness. As a devout Christian, she probably spent a lot of time praying. She probably also spent a lot of time with her family members. On her way to recovery, it is also possible that she was reading or that someone was reading to her, and that she did embroidery, as these were activities that she was reported to have done later in her life as queen. Fatality in the Boleyn family. Although she, her father and her brother would eventually recover, William Carey, the husband of Anne's sister Mary, died on the 22nd of June from the illness. Mary not only became a widower, but was also left without financial securities, even though her father Thomas had helped William Carey's career at court. After recovering from the sweating sickness by the 23rd of June, Anne took her nephew Henry Carey, the son of her sister Mary, as her ward and made an education accessible to him, as well as granting a stipend to Mary. Henry and Anne reunited. Anne also reunited with Henry VIII, who had urged her to ask her father Thomas to send her to court a few days earlier. They had been reunited at around the start of August, because there is a letter they wrote together to Cardinal Wolsey. After surviving this virus, Anne became Queen of England in the summer of 1533. Her reign was infamously challenged by the diminishing love of her husband the king and her own maid Jane Seymour, who actively conspired with Anne's enemies against her and managed to take Anne's husband, her belongings and her throne. In the end, Anne's enemies succeeded, and Anne got beheaded on her husband's order in the Tower of London in 1536. One of the great ironies is that the son of King Henry and Queen Jane Seymour died young, and Anne's daughter Princess Elizabeth took the throne after her cousin Queen Jane Grey had been beheaded, and her half-sister Queen Mary had died of natural causes. Elizabeth ruled England for 45 years until her natural death, in what has become known as the Elizabethan Age. Quarantine as a privilege for the wealthy. In this example, we see that quarantine could be seen as a privilege in the 16th century, that the crowded population in the city of London wasn't able to claim as much as the aristocracy that could withdraw to their houses, mansions, castles and palaces, but where death could follow them nevertheless.